On October 22nd of 2013, a 24-year-old high school teacher would leave her classroom to use the bathroom. She held nothing but smiles. Lurking in the distance was one of her own students, seemingly worried, pacing back and forth. He was pondering a disturbing choice. He then returns past the door frame, out of sight. Perhaps he changed his mind. No. This 14-year-old boy was about to do something horrifying. This is Colleen Ritzer, a 24-year-old math teacher who taught at Danvers High School in Boston, Massachusetts. It was noted that shortly before this footage, she made a comment about the state of Tennessee, the home state of one of her students, who then appeared visibly upset. She quickly changed the subject, although witnesses say his anger persisted, and he soon began talking to himself. That student was this man, 14-year-old Philip Chisholm. He was asked to stay after class for extracurricular purposes by Ritzer, in which the comment about Tennessee occurred. It's not quite sure exactly why he got so defensive about his home state, although future statements by psychologists would hint he was mentally unwell. There's some debate surrounding this exact moment about what's particularly going through Chisholm's head. Some view the pacing as himself battling his own uncertainty to prevent a horrific action. However, some pause on this frame and notice he just saw a security camera. His worry wasn't whether he should follow Ritzer to the bathroom. His worry was whether he would get caught. Philip Chisholm followed Colleen Ritzer into the woman's room and violently strangled, stabbed, and sexually assaulted her. During this attack, there was even a woman who apparently walked into the bathroom as it was occurring, although she quickly left, not because she witnessed the murder, but because she just saw clothes scattered on the ground and simply thought someone was changing. Later, additional security footage captured Chisholm walking through the halls rolling a trash barrel, which, inside, held the remains of Colleen Ritzer, as he disposed of the body in a forest not far from the school. Later in the evening, missing persons reports were filed for both Ritzer and Chisholm. The 14-year-old boy didn't return home. He was found shortly past midnight by a police officer walking aimlessly on the highway. The officer who found him searched his backpack and found the murder weapon he used on Ritzer, a bloody box cutter. Although she was reported missing, nobody knew the exact whereabouts of Colleen Ritzer or the connection between her and Chisholm, so this discovery was quite a surprise. And then, when questioned about where the blood came from, Chisholm looked at the officer and simply said, "The girl." After searching his backpack further and finding a pair of women's underwear and Ritzer's credit cards, the case began to solve itself. And only a few hours later, Colleen Ritzer's body was found. Philip Chisholm was charged as an adult for the murder and aggravated assaults, and then robbery as a juvenile offender. The defense claimed that his actions were caused by a psychological manic episode, as he was apparently hearing voices prior to the time of the attack, further supported by the witnesses' claims that he was talking to himself. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. However, only months later, he would commit another attack on a youth service worker while in custody, in an eerily similar incident. He reportedly followed a woman into the bathroom, pinned her against the wall, and began strangling and stabbing her in the neck with a pencil. Although she was injured, the woman luckily survived. On the morning of April 18th, 2016, Missy Beavers, a 45-year-old fitness instructor, was preparing to teach a fitness class at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas. Unfortunately, though, incoming storms caused the class to be moved inside the church for the day, and at the wee hours of 4:18 in the morning, Missy would arrive early to begin preparing for the class that started at 5. However, shortly after 5 a.m., would the first student arrive, only to find Missy Beavers dead on the church floors. Investigators managed to recover security footage from inside the church during the time of the attack and discovered something unexpected. From 4 a.m., before Missy even entered the building, security footage captured an unidentifiable individual walking through the halls of the church in full SWAT gear, smashing glass and trying to enter locked doors. No one has been able to identify their motives, why they were in the church, or what they were planning to do, given Missy never entered the building that day. However, although the footage was never released to the public, Missy would arrive shortly after and inevitably run into the masked assailant as she was transporting her exercise equipment from her truck to the church. During a violent encounter, she would be attacked, presumably with the same weapon the murderer used to vandalize the church before Missy arrived. The attack appeared to be horrifically random, with Missy just happening to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, running into a lunatic who happened to be stalking the halls of the church. However, as investigation persisted, some unnerving evidence appeared that hinted at Missy's murder to perhaps be more planned than one might think. Initially, the presence of the assailant was suspected to be there for burglary. However, investigation found that nothing was actually stolen. Even Missy, who carried a purse and an iPad, had nothing missing after the attack. Police began to not only believe that Missy was actually targeted, but the act of vandalizing the church was a plan to make the incident appear as a burglary gone wrong. Police claimed that the suspect possessed a smartphone with which he might have been stalking Beaver's schedules and possibly even recording her murder. There was also a collection of creepy and strange messages received by Missy from an unknown male on LinkedIn. However, investigation concluded the motive for this to likely just be flirtatious and familiar. The murder of Missy Beavers is a case that's chilled many for over a decade. The seemingly randomness of the assailant's presence in the church, along with their tactile gear as they casually patrolled the corridors, makes this one of the most unusual CCTV footage I've ever witnessed. To this day, the assailant has never been identified, and the true motive for the disturbing actions he caused that day have never been discovered. On March 1st of 2014, a grown man and a young girl were caught walking through the hallways of a hotel in Washington, D.C. However, the man was not her father, and the young girl would soon be reported missing. The girl seen in the security footage was 8-year-old Relisha Rudd, a young girl who lived with her mother at the D.C. General Homeless Shelter. She attended elementary school, to which her teachers commented on her vibrant personality. However, to the worry of many school employees, Rudd would stop attending after a note was sent excusing her absence on account of a medical disorder. Teachers believed she would return soon. However, as days turned to weeks and no word was heard from Young's mother, they would soon become increasingly worried. The note labeled her care provider as Dr. Tatum, and the school scheduled a meeting using the number attached to investigate the validity of the doctor's note. However, after the supposed doctor failed to arrive at the meeting, counselors knew something was terribly wrong, and they immediately filed a missing persons case. They called the homeless shelter and asked to speak with Dr. Tatum, but they were met with confusion. There was no medical worker named Dr. Tatum that worked at the shelter. But then, after a few seconds, a harrowing realization was made. There did happen to be a janitor named Khalil Tatum, who'd also stopped arriving at work. The same man who appeared to be holding Rudd's hand in the hotel security footage. It was discovered that Tatum and Rudd's mother became good friends through the attendance at the homeless shelter. He took a particular interest in Rudd, even buying her tablets and tickets to Disney on Ice. As their relationship blossomed, Rudd's mother became comfortable with Tatum taking Rudd overnight to stay with him and his supposed granddaughter. A decision that confused many, as Rudd would never be seen again. People who knew Rudd's mother said she always had a reason to explain why Rudd wasn't around. Even her own family had questions, with a cousin stating, "I want to know why Shamika, Rudd's mother, was telling us so many different stories about the case and just not being honest." She's gone on record expressing her worry for her daughter, although many question her intentions, and why it took so long for her daughter to be reported missing.
You don't have to take a test, but you're not eliminating yourself as a suspect in the disappearance of your daughter.
Let me tell you something. I talk to the police day to day, and they don't never discuss me. They discuss other people.
I was the police.
Police began to investigate Tatum, and only one day after discovering Rudd's disappearance would police find another chilling discovery. Andrea Tatum, Khalil Tatum's wife, was found shot to death in a hotel in Oxon Hill, Maryland. It was now clear that Relisha Rudd was in grave danger. As the search intensified, police patrolled vigorously through Washington, and for the next week, all leads to the whereabouts of Tatum and the little girl fizzled away. All hope seemed lost until suddenly, one day, about 1 to 2 weeks later, investigators found Tatum alone in a shed at a local park, dead, with an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Unfortunately, with Tatum dead, all leads went cold. Besides for the unnerving footage of Rudd entering the hotel room with Tatum, no other information was ever discovered. Rudd's whereabouts remain unknown. Although there's no resolutions, there was one additional piece of evidence that investigators discovered that greatly hints at the fate of Relisha Rudd, and the conclusions aren't comforting. Police have stated that in unreleased security footage, you can find Tatum purchasing a shovel and contractor-sized trash bags at a Home Depot, the night after the hotel footage of Tatum and Rudd was captured. It was then found he spent a significant amount of time at the nearby Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, a location close to where Tatum was found dead. It just seems very likely that Rudd was murdered shortly after the security footage and was buried nearby in a location that will likely never be found. On December 8th of 2000, Trevor Dealey was attending a Christmas party in Dublin, Ireland, before moving to a local nightclub on Lower Leeson Street. Stretching early into the morning, at about 3:20 a.m., Dealey left to return to his apartment. However, he seemed to change direction and instead head towards the bank that he worked at. There happened to be a storm that night, as well as an ill-timed taxi strike. so it's likely that Dealey decided to stake out at his office for a moment to let the storm cool down. The following footage was taken from security cameras outside the bank, and it's led to some questions regarding Dealey's safety, a cause for concern that we'll address as we progress later into the night. Shortly before Dealey arrived, we can see a man walking into frame by the front gate of the establishment. He waits, and as Dealey arrives, they proceed to have a conversation while Dealey waits for security to allow him in. However, as their conversation concludes and Dealey walks away, more men begin to gather at the front gate, and the stills are just haunting. The fact that Dealey was even able to visit his office was because some employees worked the night shift, leading into the early hours of the morning. One of the employees even recalled having a conversation with Dealey while he was visiting the building. Gathering at the gate wasn't unusual, as many employees used this spot to smoke and take breaks. Although something worrying would happen just as Dealey left. The one loiterer remaining was leaning against the fence by the side of the gate, as you can see from this camera angle. But after Dealey passed by, the man would wait a few moments, then turn the corner. Trevor Dealey was being followed. The disappearance of Trevor Dealey unfortunately occurred at a very poor moment. The following day was a Friday, so when Dealey didn't arrive at work, they assumed it was because of the long night. He did visit the building at about 3 a.m. after all. His flatmates were also out for the weekend, so no one was present to suspect his disappearance until Monday, when his second absence from work caused reason for concern. He was then reported missing, and after receiving a copy of the CCTV footage, investigators worked diligently to identify the man who seemed to be watching him from behind the gate. Initially, it was determined that the man who talked to Dealey outside the gate wasn't the same man who followed him down the road. However, after an enhanced version was released in 2016, it was determined the two might be connected. It was then theorized in 2017 that Dealey may have fell victim to unrelated gang warfare, as the area he was walking through was notorious for gang-related traffic, although further investigation proved this to be unlikely. The only real lead that they had was the man following close behind. Although, in 2023, even this was disproved, as they apparently traced the man and found him to be of no particular interest. To this day, Trevor Dealey remains missing, never heard from or seen ever again. His final moments were mysterious as they were unnerving. Although investigators determined the man following behind him as a non-factor, it's hard not to question the motives of those watching him and those lurking close behind. What happened to Trevor Dealey? On May 5th of 2017, a man was jogging along the Putney Bridge in West London, just as the security camera behind the bus capturing the man spotted something terrifying: an attempted murder on a random woman. Luckily, the woman survived, as the bus in front of her swerved, avoiding her head by merely a few inches. However, it seemed the man wasn't finished. Although on the opposite side of traffic, it was revealed that the man continued to jog as if nothing ever happened, reaching the end of the bridge before running back on the opposite side. As he passed, the woman began yelling at him, to which he simply ignored her and kept on his way, jogging as if he wasn't inches away from murdering someone he didn't even know. Investigators attempted to find some motive for the man's actions, although the entire scene was very confusing. He clearly avoided the man who was walking in the same path as the woman, but almost as if it was a burst of impulse, swerved closer to the woman and pushed her into oncoming traffic, not even missing a beat in the pace of his jog. I say confusing, although I'm aware it's not uncommon. There's a very apparent connection to men preying on vulnerable women, so it's not completely baffling that the jogger decided to attack the woman and not the man, but the randomness of it all. It's very disturbing. It's also unnerving to think about how the man didn't even try to escape the crime scene once it was done. I just think about how he stayed on the bridge and wonder, was he possibly having a psychological break? Or maybe was he running back to see the results of his murder? The man didn't even look back after pushing the woman, so it's very possible he could have assumed the woman got hit by the bus. It was very close after all. It's also possible that the only reason he turned back was because it was the typical route that he jogged, and whether he killed someone or not, he was going to continue on his day, as if nothing ever happened. The assailant who tried to murder a woman during his jog has never been identified or arrested.